dear, we're making more progress now. Yes, dear, we're making more progress now. Yes, dear, we're making more progress now. Still have a long way to go. They promised to bring us more revenue and quality. Promised to bring us more revenue and quality. Promised to bring us more revenue and quality. Instead is now on its way. Yes, dear, we're making.
Hello everybody, this is Brian O'Haron, April 17th, 2008. A very spring-like day out today, very close to a lot of interesting days over the next week or so. Today you'll see up on the background is Aurora Estates. That's the second large 300 condo development between down along the corridor about where Mountain Road comes down up in that area to the right if you're going towards Torrington. You also see a small picture of a great man, somebody I spent a lot of time with when I was in school, reading about, getting lectured about, and talking about, and that's Alexander Hamilton. I thought it would be fitting to talk about Alexander today because we're going to talk a lot about the budget and about my green papers that I handed in to various commissions along the way, if I can get to all of them. So they're up there today, and I want to thank Alexander Hamilton. He's buried right around Wall Street. I used to go over there on my lunchtime once in a while and just stand by there and read the inscription and with a bit of solitude. So he's the first treasurer of the United States of America. He's got all kinds of great friend of George Washington. Unfortunately, he wasn't a very good dueler, and he ended up dying in a duel there in Burr at a young age. So he did an awful lot. He probably did more than all of us put together in his short lifetime to help our country. So thank you, Alexander, for that. Pleasure to have you here today, along with one of our opportunities, which is the development along the corridor, the two developments along the corridor. So we'll talk a bit about that today. So number one, the agenda. I'm going to give you a few comments today, not too many, because I want to get into other things. We'll talk, I got a few notices, not too many. The financial update will be interesting because I'm going to try to reiterate some of the points I made last week based upon questions I got during the week from various people around town. They asked me to talk about that a bit more, so I will. I wasn't planning to talk too much about it, but since I got so much feedback via the email and talking to people, I thought I'd do some more there. Then I'm going to reiterate the town problem because I want everybody to know and remember what the town problem is, and there won't any be confusion about that. Okay, and then I'm going to, last week I handed in a green paper to the Planning and Zoning for the Aurora project. I'm going to read that to you. Hopefully I got enough time to do so. Then I'm going to just give you an idea of what the green papers were. I guess the 206 green papers were. I'm going to read you the 208 green paper. It's 2 years since I wrote my first green paper, and more than that even. And some progress has been made, but nowhere near what should have been made over that 2 years. And there's probably 2 to 4 years to go before we even begin to see the beginning of construction of some of this stuff. So we got a long haul ahead of us. And then, if I get to, which I don't think I will this time, the budgeting and balancing meeting stuff, the 3 budget balancing meetings, I do have those broken down by each vote, so you can see what they were. But I don't think I'm going to get to that tonight. If not, I'll do it in a future meeting where I have a little more time. When I first started this program, I said, how am I going to fill an hour every week? That seems like an awful lot. But I can tell you, I got more data here that I get from downtown and around, and, you know, I can't fill an hour. I mean, I could fill 2 hours now probably if I had to, but that would be much too long and boring for most of you, so we'll stick with the 1 hour for now. So that's that. Now, as far as the comments are concerned, Earth Day is on Saturday, and I can see signs around town where everybody's going to be doing a lot of picking up all over town, and some are asking for volunteers and some aren't, but if you can help with any of that, especially with your own yard, I'm a firm believer that everybody should keep their own area clean and not have to have somebody come around cleaning it, and that includes things dumped down there by passers-by too. So if I see anything all the way along the strip, I usually pick it up and every day or so and clean it up, and that way other people don't have a big job to do in front of my yard or my neighbors. Fishing, first day of fishing is coming up pretty quick. Everybody's asking about that, and that's a big day at the lake, at least, and I'm sure down around in the rivers too. So that's going to be coming up pretty quick, and then off we go with fishing season. All right, the Windsor Recreation Department, as I mentioned last week, is calling for volunteers to work and or bring tools to the Manor Playground Community Build Day, guided by Bill Simeone. He's a representative from the Play Pro company, and he'll be there to help direct everybody and everything. Now, that will be on Saturday, April 19th. Beginning at 9 a.m., and the tools needed are strong cordless drills, 6-foot step ladders, rakes, shovels, many hands to contribute. You still have a little time left, and that paper's a little rounded, so it wants to fall down. If you have a day or so left, so contact Alicia Corso at 379-8670, 379-8670, if you want to contribute or bring any tools or want some information about the whole thing. The Manor Playground is located between Oakdale, Glendale, Fir, and Palmer, and it starts at 9 o'clock. So hope people show up and give them a hand there, and they'll get that playground in shape. As far as notices are concerned today, the town meeting is scheduled, as I said last week, for May 5th, 2:08 at the Gilbert School Auditorium. Everybody is welcome, not just voters and taxpayers, but anybody who's interested in learning about how democracy works in our country is welcome to attend, as long as they behave. The referendum will be scheduled from the town meeting and will be held after enough notice is given. There's certain rules about that, which we won't go into here, but you'll find out from the town hall, if the town clerk, they have to wait 30 days, they have to publish it in a newspaper, and things like that. Applications for the elderly and disabled tax exemption submissions will be accepted still until May 15th. And, so if you're interested in that, now's the time to do it. Applications continue to be available from the assessor's office in the town hall. Now, there was an Aurora Estates public hearing continuation on Wednesday, April 9th, 2008. I attended and presented a green paper, which I hope to read tonight. It's a page and a half or so, in support of the project if it's done responsibly. I will read that paper tonight if I get that far. The public hearing has been extended on Aurora Estates at least until the next meeting on May 28th, 2008. The date of the next regular meeting. And I don't have it written down here, but last night there was a meeting of the inland wetlands, and they decided to postpone the end of their postpone their decision making for another week or so. So I don't know the exact date, but you can see that in the newspaper or call the Inland Wetlands office for the time. It'll be a public meeting. People can go to it. The Planning and Zoning Commission, Planning, Conservation and Development, POCD, discussion was also held on April 9, 2008. After a short discussion by the board members, it wasn't a public hearing, it was just amongst the board members. After a short discussion, the application was denied. This decision and reasoning is now being reviewed by the town leaders for a number of reasons. I personally think this was a bad decision. That's my view. It may turn out to be a good decision in the end. You know, planning and zoning doesn't make too many bad decisions, as I can see. But this one here I don't agree with, and I think they should have gone for those changes, and we made it very clear that we could get that sewerage up to these developments that we need to do it. But anyway, the jury's still out there, and it may or may not, the decision may stand, it may not stand. We'll when we find out more, we'll let you know. The 8-inch water pipe is now being installed down the corridor, Route 8 corridor there. You can go see it, the old Route 8, to the state property, and developer says he can live with that. The town's still a little concerned because of the future costs, which may or may not be incurred on this project. So that's something that's still under discussion by the town leaders. I know nothing about it, but that's still a concern. I did read things in the paper about it. That's how I know about it. So, all right, now, for the financial update, pay attention here. If you got your pencils out, you might want to write some of this down. If you don't, that's okay. The budget, as it stands, is an increase of 7.10%. That's what I told you last week, and that's what the town's telling me. If not reduced at the May 5th town meeting. It can be reduced. If somebody wants, they vote in favor of reducing it, they can do that. They cannot increase it at the town meeting. At 7 p.m. at the Gilbert School Auditorium. And I've never seen that full, that auditorium, probably half full for these meetings. Let's hope this time it's full, but not very often does it fill up. And if approved by the voters at the following town referendum. So it has to do two things. It has to get by the intact through the town meeting, and then it has to vote out at the town referendum, which will happen 30 or some amount of days after the May 5th. And then there's very little of the past $57 million bond commitment. I'll make this point very clearly. I'm going to talk a little bit about this over the next few slides. But what we had in the $57 million bond commitment is very little of that's in this budget. There are the Pearson School. The exceptions are the Pearson School OCR complaints. They're in there, not as a bond, but as money in the budget. So, and that money will carry forward for next year for one of the other schools, and the following year for another school if we vote it in over the next 2 years. The exceptions are the Pearson School OCR complaints and some repairs to the various schools. And those repairs are, one of them, I think, Bachelor, I think, needs a little piece of the roof repaired, and both Bachelor and Hinsdale need some pipes underground to the oil tanks changed from galvanized pipe to whatever they change them to nowadays. And these are budgeted expenses and not bonded expenses. So this is very important to know, and we'll talk a bit about more now coming up. All right, so we got 7.10%, and that's what the mill rate equals. 1.77 equals 7.10%. And I broke it down into these categories for last week. I'm going to repeat them again this week. Capital is about 0.30 of this, or 17% of the 1.77. And most of that capital is previously required expenses that never got made. The OCR complaints. It's most of that. Not all of it. There's probably a little bit that isn't. But basically, that's what it is. So we're basically paying for past sins there, and that's being put in the budget. I don't know if we got some wind going here or what, but my things keep falling over. I'm going to push this back a little bit. Okay, there. All right, now, I don't think the air conditioning on is probably what's doing it. All right, so the capital is 0.30 or 17%. Mostly OCR stuff that we put in the budget this year and will continue next year and in the following year, provided it gets approved. The debt for the town, which was the 2006 bond issue, that's kicking in more this year and will kick in even more next year. So that's 0.41 of a mil, and it's 23% of this 100% of this request. The town operating budget, now that's mostly inflation of one sort or another. It's raises, it's the high cost of fuel. We don't get hit too hard by fuel this year because we had arrangements and things, but it's also medical expenses. Our premiums have gone up by 19% average, I mentioned last week, and I can't list every single thing, but inflation is one of the most important parts of this 0.5 of the 1.77 mils. Yeah, it's 26% for the town budget, mostly inflation things. There are a few things added to the budget. One person is made from part-time to full-time, and two people actually. The fire marshal is as well. So there's a couple of increases there because people felt we needed that. All right, so that's where that stands. Now, as far as debt is concerned, that went down 0.02 because we're paying less than we did last year for some of the school stuff. And then the Board of Education budget is 0.63. So notice that the town budget is 0.41. This Board of Education is 0.63, and that's 36%. So it's higher than the town increase, right? Now the whole budgets are, you know, the education is a huge percentage of the budget. But as far as this year's increase is concerned, these are the percentages. These add up to 100%. This adds up to 1.77 mils, and these are the breakdowns. Now, what I've done for you now is I've taken these breakdowns and I've said 0.30 for the OCR stuff. We're assuming it's 0.30. It might be 0.28 or something, but you know, I'm sure somebody will let me know if it's off a hair. But and we add that to the 0.41 for the 2006 bond issue, and that equals 0.71 or 40.11% of the 1.77 mils. So you can see that I call this the history part. This is history. Not much we can do about that. We all know we have to do the OCR stuff. We have no choice but to do the bond stuff, and we're lucky it wasn't double that this year, but we didn't get some of the work done. So we're getting off a little bit lightly on that bond carryover. When I was projecting it months back, I was projecting 100%, more like 400,000. Turned out to be 2.5 or so, 150,000. So we lucked out there a bit. Then, if you take that, this is what I call the history part, 0.71, and subtract it from 1.77, which is the mill that's going to the town meeting, you get 1.06 mils, or 59.89% of the proposed 1.77 mils. And that's an increase. If you just include this piece, not the history, I'm eliminating the history now, so you can compare apples and apples a little bit here. If you look at just what we're increasing for this year without the baggage of the history, that turns out to be 4.34%. So rather than a 7.10%, which is for the total increase, and it will be 7.10, because it will include history and it will include the run to town for the next year, should it get past the town meeting and the referendum. So that's 4.34%, and that's about 2.4% above the Consumer Price Index CPI of 3.5% for 2007. So it's a little higher there. And about 5.78% above U.S. inflation for 07. Now pay particular attention here, because the 07 2.75% inflation is no longer that. But with that, for about 0.99% above the inflation rate for January, February, and March of 08. So we're up and around, and I don't know, it's a higher average. I put 3.95% here, but when I look on the internet, I get different numbers. But basically, it's more like a little over 4% right now for the last 3 months. That's when inflation's been running. And you know, oil hit $115 a barrel just yesterday. I don't know what it is today. And you know, we're getting higher prices of everything, gasoline, heating oil, everything's going up. So we and our families, our little businesses that we run as a family, we're getting hit pretty hard with inflation now, and so is the town. Now, some of these they might have negotiated a little bit lower in the past, but that's basically it. So we're only 0.99% over the 3.95% inflation for the first 3 months of this year, which it looks to me like is going to be carried out for the rest of the year. We'll keep an eye on that. So the source of inflation data is from inflationdata.com. Anybody can look at that and see, if they're interested in it, what's happening. You don't have to listen to me, and you might see, remember, these are approximate numbers. They change all the time, and depends on whose data you look at and how you read that data. So it's a little tricky. Now, having said that about the budget, I just want to put the facts in perspective for you. So you see how the 7.10% and the 1.77 mils is composed. There shouldn't be any question in your mind about that now, because I've done it 2 weeks in a row, and I'll probably do it again next week, because I want people to understand that we are carrying baggage here from the past, and some of it very good. I mean, the 2006 bond issue did a lot of good for the town, so now we're starting to pay for that. Okay, up until this year, I don't think we had any costs for that, and then next year there'll be another jump of maybe a couple $100,000 for that. So we need to remember that. Now, I do want to talk for a second about the businessmen that are now in charge of the town. And the businessmen, I want to point out a few of their accomplishments, because I do get a lot of questions when I go around, well, what are these businessmen doing? They're not doing any better than anybody ever did before. And, you know, and then a lot of people say they're doing wonderful, and they're doing a very good job. But I just wanted to say that whenever you do a budget, when you've only been in office 4 or 5 months, you're not going to, you can't turn this ship around in 4 or 5 months or 6 months or even a year. When I first started talking about this before the election and during the election and after the election, I told you it would probably take them 5 years one way or another. And that's one of the reasons I said I would stick here as long as I can stand it, and try to help them get elected again, because they're going to need the time. Things don't happen overnight in organizations, bureaucracies, especially government organizations and bureaucracies. So I just saw one of our best corporate leaders on TV last saying he wanted to run for president, but he was advised by many senators that he didn't run for president because he would end up being frustrated to death, because he wouldn't be able to get anything done. So, you know, it's kind of a hard when you get into these bureaucracies and organizations like this, to, you know, you have to do things in a certain way. And, you know, if you see there's problems, well, somebody's salary's gone up, you must think that, or know that, these things don't happen lightly. There are rules in town. You can't just monkey with salaries. There's unions and there's all kinds of rules, and things have to be well thought out and prepared, and some things can't be done and some things can be done. Or they might say, well, why did this fellow get this much more than that fellow? And how do I know? You know, you have to go in and dig into the town and find out exactly what happened over the years and why these things are the way they are. Now, as far as one person getting if you attract a person in town that's making more than perhaps they were before, usually in business you pay for the job, and you have a job to be done and you want a person to do it, and that's what you pay for. And if you have to attract the person into a difficult situation, as Winston is, and to move his house and maybe his family, and with very short notice on termination, then you know, you have to pay for what it's worth. And let's hope it all works out. From what I've seen so far, I think we did a very good thing, and we're going to end up benefiting. And I know the last interim town manager did a lot of good for us and helped the town quite a bit in only 3 or 4 months of occupation of the job. So the businessmen have reversed long-term financial backward trends to forward progressive trends. They've reversed that already, right? And, you know, they killed the bond issue, which was going to be a big backward step. And as far as finance is concerned, it would have been good for the schools maybe and things, but we couldn't afford that. So they've killed that, and all the interest, $13 million worth of interest associated with it, and 20 years of tax increases to pay for it. They've reversed that, and they've put in a progressive trend with emphasis on increasing profitable revenue. Now, as you know, that isn't going to happen overnight. That's going to take 5 or 6 years. I put my first green paper in 2 years ago, and my second one in just last week. I'll probably put one in 2 more years. But eventually, if we keep working the issue, we'll get there. Now, there are other ways we can increase the revenue besides the 2 developments here on down along the corridor. We can, and people are, I guess, looking at and studying putting in a new industrial park. But whenever I say, well, how much money are we bringing in from each of the industrial parks now in taxes, nobody can answer it. And how much space are each of them? Nobody can answer it. And then I say, well, the 3rd industrial park, how much money will that bring into town? Well, we don't know. You know, it depends. So And by the way, it is not easy to find space here, not impossible, but it's not easy to find space for a third industrial park. Now, we all like industrial parks, and that would be a very good addition to the town, and I'm hoping that all comes about, but I would say that's years away. It's not going to happen right away. And then, of course, we talk about getting more retail businesses in the town. That's tough, too, because I talked once to the past, not the present, but the past head of the Development Commission. He said, Brian, until we get these test scores up, it's going to be tough because there's a lot of reasons why people want to make sure when they come to town that they're putting their kids into good schools and that the test scores are competitive. So I would say that's very important. So we got three tough nuts to crack here. None of them are easy. And there basically aren't many other options besides that. So I don't think there's a money tree around, and I don't think anything's going to fall from the heavens. So we're going to have to earn it by taking one of those three approaches. And I've always pointed out in my papers for the 5-year plan that I put together and put on this show that we're going to have to do a little of each of all those because we can't wait for the quantum leap, which is developments on the Hill, which may never even happen. We do have a small minority of people in the town fighting that and trying to make it better, too. They're trying to make it better, and, you know, some of them don't want it to exist. So we have some drag on this whole thing. So that has to be resolved by the selectmen. I'm hoping they hurry up and do that. So what we want to do is get this profitable revenue and get things done with minimal bonding expense. And I think we're going to see an emphasis on minimal, not no bonding, but small bonds, minimal bonds, and things that we could probably absorb without choking on. They also changed the town manager. Nothing against the prior town managers, but they put in a town manager that they thought would help them to increase the emphasis on number one above, i.e. getting in the revenue and running more like a business and planning better and all that kind of thing. So, and when they increase the emphasis on proper planning, so we're already beginning to see it in the town. You'll see it if you watch the selectmen meetings and in talking to people around town. There will be more of an emphasis on having 5-year capital plans that are accurate, and responsible, and there will be pretty good follow through there. I can see it happening already, and the guy's only been here 2 weeks. Included Pearson OCR money in the budget for 08 and 09. That's one of the things you're going to be voting on. There's money in there to do the Pearson OCR by the due date next year, and they're going to be working on that. So now that's in the budget. And that's not a bond. It's not extra on the bond side. Now, to be fair to all, the bond issue wasn't really going to cost us much this year or next year or the following year. But after that, it was going to start to be bigger numbers. So I didn't even count it here because it was basically zero for this year, 2008, 2009, from that bond issue. It was very, very small increase. So they did put in the money for the Pearson thing, which will roll over for the next 2 years if we vote it in. Now I'm going to once again repeat the town problem. I'll go as fast as I can on this. I keep repeating the same thing over and over again because I wanted to get out, tell all your friends, and talk about it. But the major town problem here, you can only cut so much out of the budget every year, and you can only keep that down so long without deteriorating your infrastructure and not getting things done that need to be done, as we all know now, in the schools, in the fire department, the police station, and the town hall, and everywhere. You all have a lot of work to be done. And that was the subject of that big, huge bond issue. So over the last 10 years, the town of Winchester's net grand list has grown at an average of 3.52%. Now, net means it doesn't include people that don't pay taxes, like churches and other nonprofit organizations and people who don't pay tax. So when I say profitable, I mean we need to grow the net grand list with people who will pay tax, and they have to be additional taxpayers, preferably with little cost associated with them. The net grand list has grown at the average of 3.52%, or 16 million. Now this changes now with the new reval and all, but I haven't included this year's reval in these numbers yet. 16,026,447 per year. Now that's just the grand list. That's not taxes. That's the money available for us to get taxes from, and the taxes come from the town meeting and the budget and the referendum. So that's where they come from. So the town budget has grown at an average of 3.94%, or 026,000 per year over the last 9 years. They only had 9 years of data there, so I didn't go digging for the 10th, but that gives you a pretty good idea. So your property taxes have increased at an average of 3.93%. Not bad for a town like us. These statistics have not been enough, assuming responsible spending to adequately maintain the town's infrastructure and improve certain service needs and desire. The town is also very dependent upon various apparently unpredictable state of Connecticut grants and aid that may or may not continue to flow in the future at the same advantageous rates. Whenever you talk to anybody about these state grants, the first thing they do is warn you. Brian, these may not happen the same every year. They might go down, they might go up. We don't have any way to predict it. We can't even predict it. There are no formulas. There's nothing, you know. So it's really difficult when you get into this. And since it's a third of our budget, it's kind of scary, to be honest with you. Just think in your own family. If you couldn't predict, you knew what your expenses were going to be this year for your family's food, heat, and whatever else, and you didn't know where 1/3 of your revenue was going to come from. You'd be pretty shaky and pretty scared about that. So that's how we are as a town. We, you know, they're not going to cut this to zero right away, but you know, anything can happen here, and it doesn't take much to affect the percentage they need from taxpayers. I mean, if it just drops a few $100,000, that means the taxpayers have to pick that up. If it drops more than that, and it has in the past, then that means they have to do that. So now, my green paper series is my attempt to show you an opportunity and approach that may improve the situation if implemented expeditiously. And that doesn't mean unsafely, it just means expeditiously. And expeditiously here means let's get going now, and let's get it moving, and let's have plans for everything, and then probably in 5 years we may have our head above water here, and we won't have 7.10% tax requests. I mean, you know, I mean, I get that in the end, but if you don't get to 7.10, that means some services will have to go, and some will be diminished, and some will not be added. So you can watch closely on that, and you'll see. So the other night, I put in a paper to the Planning and Zoning public hearing, Aurora Estates. And I think I'm just going to read this to you. So if you can switch the cameras here. That's good, thanks. The P&Z public hearing, Aurora Estates, that's the 300 condos that are going up down along Corridor. They're presently in both inland wetland and planning and zoning for approval. The meetings have been going on quite a while, and they're going to continue to go on for a while longer. But anyway, on 4/9/8, I presented this paper entitled A Balanced Decision. Dear Planning and Zoning Commissioners, despite the relative size and complexity of this development effort, I know that you and your experts will do your best to evaluate this application and come to a responsible, well-balanced decision for the town of Winchester. So I want to, just for you, I want to say that we emphasized that it's a well-balanced decision, it's responsible, and we want them to evaluate and do their best. So nobody's saying let's put through something that isn't responsible for the town of Winchester. Everybody wants that to happen, and I'm sure that will be given the consideration it needs. Back to the letter. Although a very few residents, and I mean a few, talking about a small number here, residents consider the project risky, it does offer a tremendous amount of additional benefit to the town of Winchester. Its education system, its business environment, its residents, and all of the others that would like to live in this area. I know my dad and mom would have given probably one of their hands to be able to live in a shack in this area. They love this area. They come there and visit and go to the beaches in the summer, but they couldn't afford the area, so they did not live there. And that's one of the reasons I was always very interested in the area, because my mom and dad took me up here and always praised it, but they couldn't afford this area, much like a lot of our present taxpayers can't afford it any longer here and may have to move. So, and all of the others that would like to live in this area. To achieve these benefits, we all know that there cannot be positive advancement without some degree of risk by all of the parties concerned. We all have to take risks here. As a town, we must plan to manage the risk with the developers. There has to be a symbiotic relationship, a joint relationship, like Siamese twins almost, between the developers and the town, if you want to have a responsible development effort, before the permits are granted and after the permits are granted, through the development and sale of all the property, and even further later through through integrating all the people. There'll probably be almost 2,000 people coming to town, maybe 1,700 that will come over the next 10 years if this project goes ahead, and they have to be integrated into the town. Very few children will be in this group, but the people will be integrated. There's a lot of benefit to that, and it'll be good to all of us. So to achieve these benefits, we all know that there cannot be positive advancements without some degree of risk-taking by all the parties concerned. As a town, we must plan to manage the risk with the developers. So if you go to any project management school or CEO school, they'll tell you you have to manage risk, and you have to get in and work with it and be positive about it. And to not want the people to come to town and make up reasons that may or may not be valid. I hear a lot of reasons. I see it in the paper, I hear it on TV, that aren't borne out by facts from the testimony in the public hearings. So, and a lot of people ask me about, is this going to be, government-provided housing for people with a lot of children? Well, no, it isn't. And it can't be changed to that without the town's approval. So are they going to make changes to the condo rules to say that people under 90 or under 65 or whatever the number is there, 55, can come in? No, not without going to the town for approval. So if you go to the actual records or you listen to it through the meetings, you find that a lot of the rumors that are going around are kind of stimulated and stirred by people who want to retard the progress here. So, but we don't want to do that. So we got to all work together, and we must plan to manage the risk with the developers. It's got to be team effort, and the them and us will not make it happen, right? It just won't happen if we do that. Now, providing that there are no showstoppers, i.e., providing there's nothing like we don't find an Indian burial ground, or we don't find an oil well up there somewhere, or we don't find some what is considered to be unreasonable showstoppers, and everybody agrees they're unreasonable showstoppers, we've got to make sure we don't find those. And if we don't find any showstoppers, it cannot be reasonably and amicably resolved between yourselves, i.e. the commission, your experts, and the developers and their experts all together regarding this application. I would ask you to approve this project without endangering the possibilities of success. You have to be careful when you work through an approval process with developers, and vice versa. It's two-sided here, two ways, that you don't so injure yourself on either side or your relationship that it jeopardizes the project from being well done once it's approved. So there's a lot of interest here by everybody, and I do think that our town leaders can take more interest in these developments that are happening. They can take more interest in the possible third industrial park, and they can take more interest in getting these test scores up. So, and that doesn't mean just throwing money at the problem. There has to be we have to get the money to be able to throw it at the problem. Okay, so so we're hoping that this would happen without endangering the possibilities of success. Successful businessmen and business owners know that in order to be successful concerning any relatively large development effort, this is 300 condos plus 456 in the other project, all parties involved must be given a fair chance to succeed from the outset. Otherwise, everyone loses. We must agree a workable solution and pull together, town and developers, to make the project a success for everyone. Once the project is approved, I encourage you, the commission members, to draft a unanimous recommendation to the Town of Winchester Board of Selectmen, the new town manager, and the planning and zoning director, asking them to create, if possible, and there may be reasons why they can't, a line item in the annual budget called, say, for example, Town of Winchester Assisted Development. This comes right out of my green papers that I wrote 2 years ago. The Town of Winchester Assisted Development will be the name of it, and an associated sinking fund. The sinking fund are allowed in our charter. If you put money into them and they're approved at the town meeting and they're approved at referendum, then that money can only be used for that purpose and can't use for any other purpose in the future unless it's agreed to at the town meeting and the next referendum or some other referendum. Now, a lot of times leaders, as the past leaders, they don't like sinking funds because then they can't move that money around from one item to another without the approval of the taxpayers. So now this group I know likes sinking funds. I know this town manager likes sinking funds. Doesn't mean we'll ever get any sinking funds, but basically the concept is sound. It's used all over the world, especially in America, in a very capitalistic system. So I always say we all have sinking funds in our family, money set aside for retirement, money set aside for the children to go to college, money set aside for vacations, money set aside for buying a new house, all kinds of things like that. Those are relatively sinking funds. They're not as strict as that, but you basically don't want to take any money out of those for frivolous reasons, and you certainly want to make sure the head of the households agree before you do take any money out that you probably are taking great risk in doing it with any of the intended uses of the funds. So I request the town to set aside a given number of years, say X%, for a given number of years, X percentage of the taxes generated by this development. So I'm asking them to take some of the taxes every year for them forever that are generated by this development, put them in the sinking fund, and the sinking fund can be used for some reasons I will state in a few minutes. So we put them in the sinking fund, and the money set aside can be used to help promote developments in the town of Winchester that will benefit the town and its residents. Now, I'm going to name a few here in a minute, but the money can be used in a great number of ways to attract and keep responsible developers and business people. For example, it'll help us finish and redo our plan of conservation and development enhancement. And there will be monies there so that we won't get in the pickle we're in now where we've got one that should have been updated but hasn't been updated. B, incentives for business to locate here. This will provide incentives for people to locate here. A sinking fund will help with that. And it's always good to be able to help businesses because remember, there are partners, any business that's coming to town, and the ones that are here like Howmet and other ones, Homer D. Bronson, they help the town and the town helps them and they work nicely together, and you don't see pickets there and you don't see people pulling the rug out from under them or anything. They're working together and they're helping our town. So they're good for us. You hardly ever hear a word about it. A lot of people work there too. So assist in cleaning up the brownfield factories and building environments that you see all over town here. If we had some money from the development, we could put some towards that and incentives, or at least to meet our part of the grants that might come up if we get grants to do this work. One of the problems we have now is whenever we get a grant, unless it's a 100% grant, we have to go to the taxpayers to pay 30% of it or some percentage of it. But if we get that money from the development, put it in a sinking fund, then maybe there'll be some money there over the years for that, and it'll build up if you put a little in each year. Produce parking areas. D, produce parking areas that will enable more parking in various areas in the town. Some people say we don't need any more parking. Other people say we do need parking. So that needs to be resolved, and if you don't need any parking, then you don't need to put any money away for it. But I would say if we do need parking, we should put some money away for it, and then when we get enough money, we can provide the parking. And again, it might only be part of helping to reach our portion of a grant, and that's okay. Without extra burden on the taxpayers every time. And then taxpayers turn it down because they don't want the extra burden. To purchase land for preservation. You've got a lot of people in town. We have a lot of acreage here. I was at a meeting the other day and he said, as you go up towards Cornwall, there's 44,000 acres of land trust area up there. It's a park, really. So We got a lot. I want to try to do some research on that with the land trust people someday. Just find out how much land trust we have in open space we really have in this town. I think you'd be amazed to find out the large numbers that are involved, and it keeps being added to. So we're not exactly an open space poor area, although it can always be improved upon. So if we put money into this sinking fund, maybe we can buy some pieces of land with it and preserve them for the future. If the developers were correct, I'm still reading from the letter here. If the developers were correct in stating that according to state statutes and the town of Winchester's zoning regulations, the commission has a responsibility to balance the needs of this community. So the commission is got to carry out things according to state statutes and our own town ordinances and our own town planning ordinances. And one of the things they do have to keep in and this is a very legal thing that I'm not going to be able to resolve, but if it's indeed is something that the developers are correct in stating, then the commission has a responsibility to balance the needs of the community. And I can tell you right now, the needs of the communities are not balanced. We need more profitable revenue to balance some of the expense we have. So it's that simple, you know. The expense part of the thing is down and the revenue side is up, and we need to balance those, and that's going to take many years. I don't see anything big happening for at least 5 years there. And again, some of the things that are coming to town will help us in that area at all. They'll help bring people to town to spend money and go to restaurants, stay in hotels, go to the movies, go to the churches, do all that kind of thing, but they won't bring us much help on getting our 7.10% tax increase lowered. So we need to balance the needs of the community. This would be an excellent way to help achieve this balance. If this project comes in and it's done properly and we work with it all the way along and help the developer and help the town, then we'll have a good development that should, over time. Now, I can, again, as I say all the time on this program, you can always sit here and come up with 30 reasons why it won't work. When I was involved in the moon landing and the quest for the moon landing over many years, in one form or another, and worked around the astronauts and all the people trying to get us to the moon, nobody ever mentioned the reason we wouldn't get to the moon. That was never mentioned. It was always, how are we going to get to the moon? You know, what do we need to do to get to the moon? So if you hear people that are always constantly giving you all the reasons why we can't get to development or we can't get to the moon, then don't pay too much attention to them. What you need to pay attention to are people who say, hey, here's a way we can work it out. Here's how we can make it work for everybody. Let's all get in and work with the developer and have the developer work with the town. Stop this animosity between the two groups, which is getting worse before it's getting better. And let's work together to achieve this goal. And I can tell you, if anybody was on any phase, and there were huge phases to this moon project, if anybody was on there that said, we're not going to make it, they weren't around too long. You know, I never heard anybody say that, but if they did say it, they'd have been showed the door real quickly from that project. I'm told that there is some capacity in our education systems for more pupils. Back to the letter again. Perhaps you can quantify the amount of spare capacity and pupil trends with the Board of Education before making your decision. Or, if legal and practical, ask the developer to make the entire project age restricted. And it's only a small part that isn't. Most of this whole big project, I'd say 3/4 of it is age restricted. But when you get 1/4 of it that isn't, that could cause us plenty of cost to the town, so that has to be watched. Developer says it'll probably be 15 to 50 children that'll be in there. Other people don't agree with that. That's in the long list of I don't agrees is that. So I have been told, since I handed in this green paper, two things. One is, I saw on TV where the town planning director said that they cannot turn down this project because we don't have room in our schools. That's not something I don't think is in their purview. Also, if we don't have enough fire protection for them, they can't turn it down for that reason. That will be the town's responsibility to get that fixed and to make sure they could put their children in the school system and to make sure we could put out fires should they occur on their property and other things like that. So I was corrected on that, and I'm glad to hear that because I think that's good. Now, with this approach is a balanced approach because the developer has offered to help the town with recreational facilities and fire department facilities, and now he's even offered to have less children in the development area. So that's very good. Now the other thing is that it's not legal, I guess, to ask the developer not to have children in the development. He has to offer that, and it has to be done in a specific way that's not illegal, because we don't have any discrimination here. So the lawyers have to deal with that. I don't know. So that might not be followed from my letter. And then I signed it, sincerely, Brian O'Haron, 211 West Wakefield Boulevard, Winston, Connecticut, 06098. I've owned the property since 1973 with my wife Joyce. We're partners in that endeavor. And we haven't always been full-time in residence. Our parents have used the place. We've rented it. Our siblings have used it. Their children have used it. And we've improved it all the time since we've owned it. And we take pride in the whole thing. So I wanted you to know that. Now, in the last 6 or 7 minutes I have, I'm not going to be able to do everything. But if we can switch back to the chart board again, I'd like to point out that in 2006, I put in my first set of green papers to the town. I sent a letter to the selectmen and with attachments on June 19th, 2006, asking them to improve these developments that were being applied for in the town. And that letter pointed out to them, hey, look, if we get this revenue in, and I showed them kind of how much revenue would be there from the documents I got out of the public hearing, it would be great for this town. And not only we could do things for these buildings downtown, but we could do things for the schools, we could do things for Highland Lake, and there's a whole list of things. I think at some next meeting program, I will read that letter to you, because it's very enlightening. You'll like it, and it's really, you say, get the money in town, put sinking funds together, and then spend it on worthwhile things to solve some of these problems we have right now, one of which was fixing up the school buildings, the town hall, buying fire equipment, buying police equipment, all that kind of thing. So that's the first letter I sent to the selectmen. Now, there are a whole bunch of attachments to that letter. And those attachments were all the letters I wrote to all the commissions in town, and I attended every commission meeting and made a little introduction during the public comment portion. But I sent a letter to Planning and Zoning, similar to what I just read to you. I sent one to Inland Wetlands. I sent one to the Board of Education. All were pretty much ignored, but I did send the letters, and I got comments back like, well, sinking funds don't work, and, you know, we don't like the development, and, you know, there were all kinds of reasons like that. But anyway, that letter went out. Then I had a handout, number one, that selectmen meeting on July 5th, 2006. I handed out a bunch of stuff. I had another handout, number two, to the selectmen meeting on July 5th. So that's 2 selectmen meetings I went to and gave them information. It's all down in the City Hall in my green papers. You can't miss them. They're green, so I can't put them up here. Well, I guess I can here. As long as I put them on the stand, I think you can see the color. I can't put them near me because I'm filtered out for green right now. But there they are. That's the green papers. That's the color green down in the town hall. And if you need copies, we can get you copies of those. Then I sent a letter to the Board of Selectmen meeting on July 17th, 2006, reiterating, giving them more up-to-date information and trying to move in that area. So those are the things that I've been doing, and I started 2 years ago. I went quiet for a while because we did receive the approval for the 456 houses, the 300 condominiums, which at that time were not 300. There was a different number and a different mix of age restricted and not. But that got turned down by Planning and Zoning. It got approved by Inland Wetlands. And then they have recently come back over the last X months, and they've gone into Inland Wetlands with a new plan that cuts back the first plan that they got denied on, tries to fix all the problems that were pointed out there, and with a new configuration for this 300 condos, and with other things included too. And but around election time, knowing very strongly that we needed this revenue, that's why I decided to get this program going and to push for businessmen that recognized that we needed the revenue and that we could set up sinking funds, and kind of knew better than most people on how to get things done. And that's kind of where we are now. And I want to eventually read these letters to you. I won't read every letter I sent out, but I do want to read the letter to the selectmen. That'll take 15 or 20 minutes, and I want to talk a bit about that. And then you'll be able to see how, if this thing happens, how it can come together and how beneficial it will be for us. And I picked today to talk about this with you because you're facing a 7.10% increase plus all your reval increases for those who got huge reval increases. And I know people stop me every day as I walk around town and around the lake and tell me that they're in the process of getting valuations on their house to put them up for sale. Some have already done so, right? So now, it isn't as though they'll come out bad out of it. Financially, they might come out all right because they bought the houses many years ago. But they won't be able to live there anymore, which is really what they want to do. They want to live there until they pass away. So, and have their children enjoy it, and have their grandchildren enjoy it, and have all their friends enjoy it. I mean, not only at the lake, but in town of Winchester and other areas that got huge increases. So that's what I'm trying to do. I want to try to help. I made this point today. Next week will be a selectmen meeting on Monday, and we'll follow up next week with a review of the selectmen meeting, and we'll see what happened there. And with that, I will say good night, enjoy the weekend, and help clean up the town. And it's in everybody's best interest. Start with your own yard. Thank you very much.